Great. Yeah, we'd like to also welcome up our next speaker, Floriane Gramlich. She's Director of Product Payments at Zalando, and she's going to talk about how to be a product leader instead of a product manager. Please give her a warm round of applause.
Hello. And apologies, I'm a little bit under the weather today, but I have some helpers here in order to guide me through. So glad to see you all here and kind of to give you a little bit of introduction so you also know with whom you're talking here about. So I'm Floriane, and basically I'm almost 2 decades now. I sound very old, mostly in the tech industry, but not exclusively. I actually started in advertising, political advertising, and then moved over into a banking group, and I'll also talk about this a little bit, and then also worked at PayPal, eBay, Twitter, OLX, and now most recently at Zalando, more or less like several roles, also as an individual contributor many times, but also leading quite big teams. Also with being a lead of leads and also engineering. And I studied history and have an MBA, so I didn't study computer science or whatsoever, so that was a big challenge, but it changed my perspective on product development a lot. And that's also brought me to this talk today, which is about product leadership instead of product management. Ultimately, I'm super motivated about developing people and really also how to see and how to bring people forward in their life, also especially women, as I still also each day still see how difficult it is for us actually to make our way. And for this matter, for anybody in a diverse environment who's different in that sense. So moving over to the matter of this today, why management or leadership instead of management. So as I said, I started off in a banking group after advertising. Sparkassenfinanzgruppe for the Germans, as you who know that, like with the red S. And there was actually a company called Sparkassenfinanzportal. Still existing, I believe. And they basically tried to handle everything online for this group. And 400 Sparkassen at this point, and I basically tried to convince the leaders of those that not branches are the future, but actually online, and also online banking is a thing. Now, kind of one of the first interactions I had there was like going to a guy in the 60s, white hair, nice suit. I talked about this. He nodded. After that, I sent a follow-up email. I received a fax. Basically, what has he done? The secretary took it, printed it, he put in his notes, and then the secretary faxed it back. So for the non-Germans, fax is still a thing in Germany. We also sometimes need it due to legal reasons. And this is also a little bit like where kind of this classical managerial types came from, right? More or less like control things, and kind of where I also got the first time an interaction with the CEO of the product. One of the things I really love the most is also an interview question I ask at every interview. Hey, we're talking about is a CEO or kind of the product manager being the CEO of the product. Yes. Okay, not too bad. And also kind of like huge PRDs or BRDs or both in the worst case, product requirement documents. And basically people who are not trying to solve customer problems and actually working backwards from this customer problem, but more or less like working on solutions and trying to execute on them and managing the process during the whole time, instead of more or less like leading through it, like with empathy. And I will talk about empathy a lot because I believe empathy is one of the most important drivers that you can apply these days as a human being, but also in product. If you're not empathetic against yourself or your customers or others, I think we're screwed. So instead of being empathetic, listening, curious about things, and actually leading instead of managing. So why should we aspire being product leaders instead of product managers? First of all, you don't want to write PRDs, and you shouldn't anymore. I think we're far beyond agile in this case. But also kind of when you look at leadership today, it usually implies people leadership, right? We're here, product leadership, this is a product leader, so it's hierarchical. This person is most likely leading more people and other people. And I believe it's different. It's not always about leading other people. It's about really kind of applying leadership principles also to your product. So not assuming that you know everything, being curious about it, asking the right questions instead of jumping to solutions. Maybe let's talk a little bit about kind of why I come to this. So 3 pitfalls to look at product management instead of product leadership. One I already mentioned, the whole thing around the product manager being the CEO of the product. What does it mean? CEO of the product means this is the only person responsible for the product. But that's not how it works. You want to aspire to work in multidisciplinary teams. You want to be on eye-level product engineering, analytics, data science, design, research, and so on and so forth, right? And that's how you should work as a team, and not having one person basically saying, you do that, you do that, you do that. Unfortunately, it still happens that way. Then either the product leaders or the product person is then acting as the CEO or as the project manager, but ultimately not empowering the team, and the teams are not autonomous and ultimately building bad products. It's unfortunately still quite common. And ultimately, we're aspiring to have empowered teams, autonomous teams, as I just said. Also, when you look at engineering, and I don't know how many of you come really from a tech background, but when I started, basically, a lot of discussions was more or less like with engineering, here are the user stories. Okay, let's go. And I did disastrous things over time. When I worked at PayPal, for example, I was building a new product and had a team, kind of pitched a long time. Then I had a team in India who actually was very junior at this time. Kind of I went through all the stories with them without context, without strategy, without them kind of helping to understand being part of this problem from the first place. The outcome was something nobody wanted. It was a waste of time for everybody involved for half a year. And ultimately, to be totally frank, super disrespectful of myself towards this team to actually act this way. So you don't want to have a delivery factory or a feature factory. You want to have people who are on the problem from the start. Same holds true as another pitfall, is more or less like to be too process-oriented. I love processes, but I'm also like per mindset, I'm a little bit of a control freak, something I learned to live with over time and kind of worked a lot. Coaching is a big thing I really love. I can only recommend this. But more or less like going back from processes to actually finding products that actually solve a problem, that has a product market fit, is really here a completely different challenge. If you only work with the process, you will also get somewhere, but ultimately you always want to go back to this customer user discovery. Same with the last pitfall is if you're focusing too much on execution. And it often happens also, right? I currently work at Zalando, and one thing kind of I love from the start is this obsession to be discovery focused. So really working on the 4D cycle, it's what we do, right? So really a lot of emphasis on discovery, and execution comes on one part, but then also the ideation starts again. So really treating this continuously as a product. If you only focus on execution, and again, like CEO woke up, and now the real CEO, not the person who thinks who's the CEO of the product, hey, I have an idea. Yeah, let's build this. Then basically you're again a complete execution. And again, many product management teams or product development teams work this way. Yeah, pitfalls, but how to apply a few things and basically make the place a better world. One is bring everybody on the table. Sounds simple, right? But actually talking about with engineering, data science, analytics, bring them in from the start, bring them in once you have identified that this is actually something you want to solve on, bring them in on the strategy from the start. And that's also a big thing. And many of you will also read books, right? It's a common thing that many companies still don't have a strategy. Being it a business strategy and then no product strategy and so on. That's also a reason why they're actually in this product management and execution trap at some point. So really also empathizing the strategy from the start, talking the strategy through, being an evangelist of this strategy, but also showing how this actually links back into the company strategy, how this links to key results. Again, also metrics. I can talk about this all day long. If you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. And that is still also a problem, that many are actually so focused on just getting something done, let's ship it, that actually forget about how to actually measure this, and being very consequent about this. Always like strategy, actions, this is how we measure, you'll get out of this trap. Which also includes like quite a precise and also inclusive communication. I think we all, like, I'm a bit half introvert, half extrovert. I have my introvert days, and my team knows already when I'm on my introvert period, and I avoid people. But many are that way, right? So being inclusive also means in environment, if you want to bring everybody on the table, give room. Sometimes listen, take a step back, and also accept if others have other ideas than you have. And actually, it can broaden your horizon so much, and actually will help your products if you do this. Which also means being present, creating trust. Empathy, again, is like a huge thing. Like, there's this Clifton Strength profile. I don't want to make advertising for it, but I really love it because it's cheap relatively, and it's 50 euros or something, and kind of it's a relatively good personality test in my opinion. In my profile, empathy is the last point. So 34. Why is he talking about empathy all the time? Because I believe still that I'm empathetic, because I'm trying to, if I'm talking to somebody, to get into the shoes of this other person, and that is something I'm trying to do all the time. And that also means leadership, not assuming that you know, but more or less like trying to understand how the other person ticks. And then if you couple that also with asking questions all the time, why? Why should I build this? Have you validated this? Okay, do you think that this number really fits into our funnel? Is that really also solving anything? Then this is more or less like also helping you in your product leadership journey. I want to segue a little bit, because now we talked about product management versus product leadership. But one thing I'm also quite passionate about is more or less like also treating your own career as a product. And this is more or less like you can apply these whole principles also to your career management, which I don't know why. Often with women, it is sometimes forgotten. Many brilliant women also like met in my time, but also in my team, they do a brilliant job. But the one thing they forgot is more or less like taking care of themselves, which is not so common with men. We can now theorize about this, but I would love that also women can learn this a little bit more and also do this and taking more time with their career. And one first step is more or less like to understand who you are. What kind of leader are you in general? Personally, I would identify myself as a servant leader as my preferred leadership style, but I'm also sometimes I need to apply transactional leadership, transformation leadership, sometimes also authoritative leadership, even if I don't like it at all. So knowing this first, who are you actually? And then treating yourself also as a product. All these things that I just mentioned, more or less like know about strategy. Why don't you have a strategy for yourself? Basically researching yourself, knowing what you want, where you want to be, what is your aspirations, what do you not want. I think it's super powerful actually to know what is something that you're not aspiring to, and basically create your own strategies here. So research yourself, get out of this hustling. Recently, I'm kind of, especially in these times, I hear hustle a lot, which means hustle is execution. And again, we'd also need execution, but getting out of this kind of I'm hustling all the time, but take a step back, breathe, and also have empathy towards myself, that I am as important as any other person, actually, that I'm taking the time and actually investing into this. So yeah, but ultimately leadership is a mindset, applies to products, to yourself, to others, and find yourself being the right leader here. I want to close with one final sequence here, and more or less this one thing is how you want to be. The one thing is also in what environment you can be that person. And yeah, we're here in Berlin. Berlin is Germany, and we have a lot of great companies. We have here Idealo, we have Zalando. I'm a bit biased because I work for Zalando. But ultimately, not every company is the same, and many companies say they're inclusive, that they are actually fostering leadership and this attitude. Find it out yourself if that is actually true, and really take the time, because if you're in an environment that is not fostering that line of thinking, then you'll always lose. And one thing I can say with Zalando, where I'm now for 2 years, I actually started as an individual contributor in a team with 3 PMs, product leaders. We're now over 40. And this was because I was enabled to actually lead, to bring out a product strategy, to actually execute on this product strategy at some point, but also to create an inclusive atmosphere within leaders that they actually can do this and can then again be multiplicators. So yeah, I'm happy to see you all here. Have fun. And again, be who you are. Thank you.
Thanks, Floriane. Now, we do have time for questions. Oh, straight away, right there. Hang on, let our microphone come to you. Also, thank you to everyone who's watching the live stream. You can also submit questions. I have my iPad here. I have access. So, yeah, feel free.
First of all, thank you very much for talking to us today. My question kind of relates to one of the last points that you mentioned, that ultimately empathy, inclusiveness, diversity, all those buzzwords that pretty much every company right now is using. And the reality is that in my experience, majority of the places I have experienced or spoke to my friends who work at, very often the reality looks very differently. So is there any advice that you would have in terms of being able to screen ahead of time for what is words and what is actually true inclusive or empathetic leadership within a company? I'm asking very, very on point because I relocated here a few months ago, and I'm in the process of now thinking what I want to do next. And this is a very massive question on my mind constantly. How do I actually effectively screen and I am able to identify culture and leaders that will be helping to grow and will create a good environment to grow?
It's a good question. It's also something where I actually did a lot of mistakes, because I always thought what is on paper is also true. So I actually research a lot. First of all, is there really a culture behind this company? And is that the company takes some time in order to also map down these values? That's the first thing, really researching the company, and then also researching a lot kind of what is being talked about this company. There's Blind, Fishbowl, Glassdoor, obviously. Talking to others, like Berlin, for example, is a super small world. Everybody knows almost everybody somehow, really figuring out how much is actually true. And this is more or less like, if I would be now looking for another job, I would research a lot. And what I've currently seen also, what is happening over the last 2 weeks, which I believe is really terrible, like with all these layoffs everywhere and somewhere, but you can also somewhere connect it here and there to the culture that a company has. If people are treated as resources or really treated as people, and kind of as, like in software development, people are the biggest investment that you have, right? And that only the culture can tell you.
Absolutely agree with all you said. And to add, I really like the tip that you mentioned about just asking like how people, especially in the product, how the leader of product perceives their role. So this kind of like, so do you see yourself as the CEO of product? Is there any other this type of kind of tips or little hacks that you develop or collected over years?
One thing is also look at the interview process, to be honest. There are some processes that are simply weird, to be honest, and not inclusive at all. And I could, maybe with a beer or a wine, I can tell a few, but they're really where all red flags go up. And that's also a little bit something, right? Kind of usually we're trying to get data as much as we can, but ultimately we also have our gut, which is also muscle that we've trained. Your gut at some point will tell you a lot. Personally, I'm sometimes, I trust it in some occasions, not my gut. And all the time, I actually really, really, really regretted it.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And you need to like the people. And you need to like the people. Like that's also kind of, I'm testing people. And sometimes I'm just interviewing just for the fun of it, not that I necessarily want to go. But I had one person, this was in an interview process, it was like, no. And then this is also an indicator, right? If you're having people there where you believe, I don't want to drink something with that person, or simply going against your values, I think values are a super important thing to guide you.
If I may add, I'd say you're also doing it now. I mean, you're meeting people, you get to know people, you make contacts, you ask them how it is. I think you can learn a lot by having a conversation with people and seeing. So you're doing a great job doing it now. All right, any other questions? Yes, over here. Carmen gets to have a bit of a workout today, running from side to side.
Hi, I have a question. You mentioned that you want to bring every team to the table and speak their opinion and so, but at the end it's like you have already an image of the product, how it should look like at the end, and they are just bringing like features, or depending on what they are bringing to the table, you are developing on it.
So basically, I'm really trying to always go back to actually what I'm trying to solve for, enrich it as much as I can with data, and trying to avoid to come to conclusions on my own. And that is also a little bit discipline. So kind of, for example, I'm saying I'm always having an opinion on almost everything, but it doesn't matter. Ultimately, it's more or less like to do the right thing. And here also, and then the PM, especially if it's a strong opinion, one needs to discipline themselves. So if you're going to the team, you already know this is how the product looks like, then you're basically tasking them with execution. And that's kind of the one thing where this is what I'm trying to avoid.
And how is it when several teams have different opinions and there should be at the end a conclusion taken to go further?
Sometimes it takes a little bit longer.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think it depends. So, for example, at Zalando, we have a disagree and commit culture. It might be that one or two people are seen kind of not buying into that, and sometimes you can persuade that basically you should be able to persuade also people. Then you might, if you can't, then you might need to think about, do I really have the right data? Do we have the right arguments? Do we need to go back and research a little bit more in order to do this? That's also possible, right? Usually if people can follow certain arguments because it's simply logical, it's easier also to come to the same conclusions. Otherwise, you just simply have opinions. Okay. Also in the team, and that's what you're trying to avoid. You want that everybody understands what they're actually solving for, and that is not a question.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay, and I think we're going to wrap up there. If you have any more questions, she's here, she's around, you can talk to her anytime. And so let's give her a big round of applause. Thank you so much.